over time, companies have grown so much, new people have come in, the market shifted that that original vision may no longer be what's most relevant to customers.
Hello and welcome to Brand Tuned, a podcast on brand management that covers trademarks and IP as they're intrinsic to brand equity. I'm your host, Shireen Smith, author of Brand Tuned. Writing this led to Byron Sharp's evidence-based research stressing distinctiveness over differentiation, which I largely agree with, though not totally. Hence our tagline, Sharp Branding. Margie, Agin, supports B2B technology companies discover what makes them unique and to find the words to say it. She is the founder and chief strategist of Centerboard Marketing, a marketing agency based in the Washington, D.C. area. She's also the author of Brand Breakthrough, How to Go Beyond a Catchy Tagline to Build an Authentic, Influential, and Sustainable Brand Personality. Hello, Margie. Welcome to the Brand Tune podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I'm curious to know, Margie, at what point do you get involved in a brand?
Most of the companies that I work with are at sort of a point of inflection. So they're entering a new market or they're finding a new customer base, launching a new product, or they're going through a rebrand because something has happened in their market space. Often they're merging with another company, or something has been such a shift that they have realized that what they started out as is not sort of what they've come to be. So that is often the point at which I get brought in to sort of take a fresh look at all of the elements that make up a brand, how the company sort of has grown and changed internally, what customers think about them, how the competitive marketplace has shifted since they last looked at it. But there's usually something driving that, rather than a startup, that's creating something out of whole cloth. There's usually some change that has happened that has initiated this thinking that, we can't do things the same old way.
So would you ever get involved in naming as a sort of side question?
Sometimes a company, has been purchased or there's something driving, a name change. So it's usually part of a larger question. I have been involved in many product naming sort of exercises. It's not sort of the overall company brand, but more how do we name a particular product so that it's clear what it does, but it's also sort of gives us room for growth over time. So that's the degree to which I've been involved.
So what is your process then? How do you help a company who's in need of your expertise? You can pick any type of situation. Say it's a merger and they need to rationalize their current brand. It's two different businesses have come together. So Tell me, what's your process?
Right. So, so that is a massive undertaking, where a project like that often starts with, looking at the two different product sets and deciding kind of what they're going to go forward with. So I will typically get involved sort of at the point at which you have two different companies that have maybe approached the market in a very different way. So, for example, I have one client now. It's a cybersecurity client, and as you can imagine, in that market, you've got companies gobbling each other up all the time. There's a lot of overlap in what different companies bring to the market. It's very confusing for buyers also to sort of understand. You've got all these different cybersecurity solutions and, ways of talking about them that aren't really clear on exactly what the different products do. So the first thing we might look at is, what are the different types of positioning, kind of messaging and positioning that each of these companies has chosen to kind of employ to try to explain what they do, and how might that be different, right? So, for example, there's one company looks at. I'm trying not to get too in the weeds or too wonky, but they might look at a concept. It's called zero trust, which is like trust no one, lock everything down, right? And the other company sort of has a philosophy of, well, you need to trust people and empower people because that's what helps your business stay productive, right? So we have to teach people to do the right thing to be secure with their technology, right? So you have two very different ways of looking at solving the problem, and they've each gone to market with these different messages. And now when we bring these companies together, we have to sort of rationalize, okay, what's our point of view now? What's our perspective on cybersecurity? It's not just about the products, right? But it's how we talk about the value that we bring and how we talk about sort of our point of view and our unique approach to the market. So this is the types of things that I look at, is sort of understanding the messaging and positioning behind the company, and really kind of trying to get clarity on what makes them unique, and then bringing those perspectives together between the two companies so that, if it's a merger, it's trickier, but, often there's one sort of overriding voice in the room, and sort of working to get everyone on that same page to say, all right, this is sort of our new value proposition, right? And our kind of our messaging framework. And now once we know that, then we have to sort of look at every piece of content, from the website, to the sales enablement materials, to the emails that we send, and say, okay, these are the things that are in line, that reflect the current messaging, that, make us sound like we're talking from, one point of view. And these are the things that suddenly seem outdated or out of touch, or, going in a different direction. So,
do you talk to customers at all in this process to find out?
So far, we've talked a little bit, mostly about how the company internally thinks of kind of their point of view, but all that is really driven too by their understanding of the market, and what's going to resonate with customers. So just kind of continuing with this idea that the companies that are being merged, right? You may have one company whose customer, they really understand their customers, but their customers are, IT people. And now maybe the other company, or, a new initiative is to start selling more to business users. Suddenly we have a new type of customer that may have totally different, concerns and experiences and questions that they ask. So I always encourage companies themselves, right, to go and interview customers, and we set up a process for gathering feedback for customers and questions to ask. Sometimes a third party coming in and talking to customers offers a different perspective, right? Because customers often don't want to tell the bad things to their customer success manager or their account manager. They may not be 100% sort of honest. And so it's nice to come in with, have a third party perspective to kind of ask those tough questions and come with an unbiased, point of view.
Do you do any other research to find out what the state of the market is, quite regardless of what the company?
Competitive research as well. Sometimes depends on the market, could be online research, and you're able to do a lot and find a lot out online or through analyst reviews and things like that. I've done secret shopping as well, right? Where you sort of you go through the website exercise, do the chat, have a phone call with someone in a B2B technology space. It's a little more challenging to do that because it's such a long sales process, but gathering information on, there's basically, I'd say, three prongs, right, of sort of developing messaging and positioning. And when we've talked about them, you've got the internal company, perspective and culture. You have the customer point of view, what is most important and relevant to them. And then there's competitive differentiation, which is really finding out if what you are saying is unique in the market and something that is truly unique to you that nobody else, the customers can't find that value anywhere else. So we look at those three elements, and that's how we develop sort of the messaging framework, which is the underpinning a brand. It's sort of the infrastructure underneath the brand, so that when you get to the point of, say the naming, as you mentioned, when you get to that point, you really understand, this is what the company is about, and how we're going to build out all of our content and all of our elements to support the brand name.
I guess it depends why they've merged, but I would imagine if one of the brands is more successful, has more traction with customers, that you might want to keep that brand and maybe not the other one. I don't know. I'm wondering how you make your decisions, how you diagnose the situation.
Well, again, it comes back really to those three elements, right? Is there something that is inherent to the new company, right, that we need to keep? What is unique in the market? And what do customers care about most? There's no sense in emphasizing a unique sort of aspect if it's not relevant to customers, right?
Yeah.
So those are sort of the three points to the triangle.
So then you will involve everyone within the company. Who do you tend to work with inside the company?
Often a project, a brand positioning, a messaging project starts with the chief marketing officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen a lot of projects where it kind of stays there. And that's a problem and a failure of many brand projects, and kind of a risk is that you do it in a silo. You've got sort of everyone goes on a retreat, brainstorms, and sort of the marketing department has a bunch of great ideas. They're in the back room cooking it up, and then they come down and sort of deliver it to the rest of the company. And that's a sort of a course for failure I have seen, because then you have people that haven't been involved in the early stages, don't sort of really understand where this new branding or positioning came from, and haven't internalized it. So they don't really know how to use it in their day-to-day lives. So what I encourage is, you do have to have a smaller group of people to start, but if you can make it cross-functional, right, where you've got sort of leaders or ambassadors or folks that will be kind of your tentacles out into the rest of the organization, then you can get also different perspectives. So you've got salespeople, product people, people that are on the front lines, like the customer and technical service folks, and marketing people who write, and people who design. So all those different perspectives really help to gain a broader understanding of the company itself, and also their interactions. They're on the front lines with customers, right? So they can sort of bring more data to the equation. So
would the founder ever still be in the business, or with the sort of companies you deal with? Would the founders still be there, or
at times? The companies that I deal with are usually not startups. So there's typically not necessarily a founder, but at times there is, or there's a CEO, or there's somebody whose original vision has been such a part of guiding the company that it's important for them to be in the room. But over time, companies have grown so much. New people have come in. The market shifted, that original vision may no longer be what's most relevant to customers.
Don't you
Yeah.
think you can learn a lot about what initiated the business, what actually was
Sure. Sort
wrong
of
that
the
made them?
origin,
Yeah.
the origin story, right, is definitely interesting. It depends on the kind of business, right, that we're talking about. I mean, for some companies, it was that are like a pioneer, or they saw a problem in the market and they found a completely revolutionary new way of doing things. That origin story can be very powerful because it really explains, what they suffered and why they saw a need for a change. Also humanizes the company too, to sort of, look at like Tom's shoes, for example. They or even Warby Parker, right? They have a story where, the founders broke their glasses and they were on an airplane and they couldn't get new glasses and they were frustrated and they went to all these places and they said, oh, there has to be a better way. Everybody can relate to that story, right? Because they've sort of been in that position themselves, and makes them feel like, yeah, these people get me. For a technology company, that it's harder to focus on sort of the individual founder as the vision, because it's sort of taken on a life past them, a B2B technology company. But it is important to humanize the story and sort of the company behind the technology, because it's so easy to just talk about products and features and functionality and forget that really this is about helping people do their jobs more effectively. So if we can humanize sort of the reason behind the company, it makes a customer feel like they're really understood and supported.
So are you actually looking for a story for them? I mean, what are you primarily trying to deliver for them?
The origin story is one example of a story, right? But there are many kinds of stories that I look for through the messaging process, sort of a galvanizing story of change, right? A story that's going to kind of take a user from their existing context, like saying, all right, these are the problems I have today. Or maybe they don't even know that they have a problem, right? Showing them sort of a story that includes a vision of the future, right? Of where they could be through change. And putting it in kind of a story format helps them see themselves go through that change. So let me give you an example of kind of what I mean by that. Okay. So kind of a classic storytelling structure, the hero's journey, right? We use it in Star Wars, the Odyssey, it comes up in literature. People are sort of hardwired to kind of understand this storytelling structure. It basically starts with sort of the hero of the story is the customer, right? It is not the brand itself. The hero, everything you think about is sort of from the point of view of the customer. They start, they're in Tatooine. They've got a problem. They have a current context that they're working in, and then suddenly they sort of get this call. There's something that triggers a change. Maybe it's a change in the market, right? Like this merger we were talking about, or it's a technology change or a compliance requirement, something that drives change. And suddenly they wake up and they say, okay, I have to change the status quo. I realize, there's more out there. And then at that point is they progress on sort of their journey. They meet you, the brand. You're sort of the Obi-Wan Kenobi in this story, right? And through your relationship with the customer, you're taking them by hand through the rest of the story. All the questions that they ask, all the ups and downs and the obstacles they face, the fights that they have, the internal and external. And through these ups and downs, and that's the plot. That's what makes this story interesting. what happened? How did you overcome it? Eventually they reach the new normal, sort of the vision of success. And that's ultimately, the ending of the story is them solving the problems that they had at the beginning, right? And sort of entering this new phase of the new normal. So I try to employ that sort of story structure to all of kind of the, not every piece of content, but as an overarching kind of umbrella for the content that we produce, the company's pitch deck that they use to in a sales presentation.
I understand the story structure, but the issue is, how are you going to make the position stick? How many things are you going to choose, words or associations that you want this brand to have in the market so that the stories can reinforce that? How many things will you?
If you hit on the points that resonate with the buyer, right? So they understand, this company gets me. You're building empathy with the buyer by reflecting their problems, their situation back to them, right? So if you're telling a story that's, have you ever been in a situation where, your software crashed and you had to redo everything that you had already done, and you couldn't get home on time, ended up working all night long, right? This sort of the painting of the picture of in a way that really reflects the customer's true reality. The words that you choose, and that's where these customer interviews are so valuable, and listening for the words that the customer uses to describe their own problem, and then reflecting in your messaging and in your content those words back to them. That's what makes that connection and kind of closes the distance between you and your customer.
The thing is, though, if you've got competitors and they're all telling their stories and humanizing themselves, how do you stand for something? How do you make sure that the whole market?
That's the trick, isn't it? Right? Yeah. Is there's so many competitors out there. There used to be, you could start a SaaS company 5 years ago and you'd have, one or two competitors, and now you have 10. You can't just tell the same story as everyone else, right? So but first you're proving that you understand the customer's point of view by reflecting their context. Maybe others are doing that as well, to your point. So then moving on in the story, you're explaining why what they may have tried already didn't work, right? What the other options are that they may have explored, or the old way of doing things. There's always an effective story technique, Yesterday's techniques aren't working anymore. We need a change in tool set and mindset, right? So that also clarifies that you understand their situation and kind of sets you apart as not like yesterday's technology, not like the others. Clarifying what it is, the unique value that you bring that the customer could not find anywhere else. That's the piece that you have to get very, very clear on.
Yeah, exactly. That's the positioning that you're trying to.
That's the positioning, right?
Mm.
That takes some time, right? To really uncover what is it that's your sort of superpower, right? What is it that makes you able to take the hand of your customer, and something that if you did not exist, right, in the world, they would not be able to do.
It's quite a challenge to achieve, to decide how to,
it's not
what to stand for.
As slapping a label on something, or a brand identity, which, I have great respect for graphics people and the visual, but the visual design of branding is just one element of this, the naming is one element of this, the real sort of what's underneath the covers. If you were to go out to 10 customers and you were to ask them that question, right? If I did not exist, or if you had not worked with my company, what would you do, right? What would you have done? And what would have been the impact of that? What would have been the problem with that? How would that have affected you? if you go ask 10 people that question, you start to hear patterns, right? And they say, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would have had to do this myself, and I would have had to spend all this manual time figuring out this problem, but you've made it automated. And so now I don't have to worry about that. Listen for what they say. Let them guide you, because they've been out there and they understand their own world better than you can ever imagine to.
So apart from your own book, obviously I've mentioned your book already, but what sort of books would you recommend for listeners who are trying to develop their brand personality and are working on their positioning?
There's a number of good books. I like storytelling books. There's a very good book called The Story Wars that's a few years old now. And there's The Business of Story. That's another very good book.
What about Story Brand? Do you like that?
I like Story, of course, Donald Miller, Story Brand. It's also, very strong. I think that one of the things I tried to do in my book that is similar to those, right, is sort of provide some really tangible frameworks and exercises that people can do on their own, right, to sort of get started with this process. And that's the types of books that I tend to like. The ones I've mentioned often have sort of an appendix or, a template that goes along with it that is very actionable. So you can put some things into practice right away.
And what brand do you particularly admire? I know I'm putting you on the spot by asking you, but is there a brand that comes to mind that you think is exemplary?
One brand, I'm not the only one who thinks this, certainly, but Slack, right? Which is, they were purchased by Salesforce, but I think they're retaining their name, at least for now. But they've done an incredible job of making their brand personality consistent, not just in sort of their outward marketing materials, right? But in the product itself. So the way that the brand is presented, the way that you sort of communicate back and forth with it, the words that they choose, the language that they employ, very, very, humanizes the product, and it's consistent so that even if you have multiple people designing and contributing, right, to the brand, to the content, or, that all of them can kind of sound like you're really talking with one person.
That's a very interesting choice.
How about yourself? What kind of brands do you think do a great job at being consistent like that?
Oh, well, Apple. Obviously, everyone would say Apple. I just love some of the content they've put out as part of their advertising, the crazy ones who think they can change the world. It's just very inspiring, I think.
Yeah, and it's such a great example of, sort of a rebellious brand where that the think different and showing the little videos and little vignettes of stories of people that were considered, like you said, a little crazy, right? But then did things a different way. So, and 10 years ago, Apple was the brand for the sort of the designer. Everybody else in the company got a PC, but the designers got the Mac because they were unique and special, and that's how people thought of themselves. But now I don't know if there's so much sort of for the outliers. It's become such a standard thing that I don't know if that reflects them quite as much as it used to.
Well, they managed to charge a hefty premium on their phones, which is quite an achievement.
That's true. Right. And yet everybody has one. So it doesn't make you a rebel anymore, right?
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Margie, for appearing on the podcast.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
That's it for this week. Do subscribe to the Brand Tuned newsletter to get weekly updates. I'd also love to get your feedback. Just send me an email to info@brandtune.com. Finally, if you liked the episode, please do share it with your friends and colleagues and review it on iTunes or whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you leave us a 5-star review, it means more people will listen and we can spread the word much more quickly about the podcast. Thank you and bye for now.